Hello, my name's Gavin Starks. I'm the founder of Icebreaker 1. We're an independent non-profit headquartered in the UK with a mission to make data work harder to deliver net zero. Today, I'm going to walk through a bit of scene setting about how we think about data, what do we mean by net zero, and how policy and our real and financial economies connect. Then going to run through an example of a program we're running that could unlock over 100 billion in investment, cover how governance can help us go far together and how humans and machines can collaborate, and finally, how you can get involved. So let's start with the scene setting. Firstly, data sharing is an economy. So we don't think about data as a technology. Instead, we think that investing in data ecosystems brings us economic benefit. And there's a report here from the World Bank and UN indicating the scale of that. And more than half the world's data is pretty dark. It's not really accessible and usable. And so on the journey here, we want to help unlock access to data at market-wide scale. And going back over 30 years, Donella Meadows here said that missing information flows are one of the most common causes of systems malfunction. And investing again in restoring those information flows is often cheaper and easier than rebuilding our physical infrastructure. So when we think about data, we need to start with how can other people use it? What are the user needs? Rather than building a database, when we think about how can others use it, we need to start thinking about data licensing and data governance. It doesn't really matter whether the data is big, medium, or small, or whether it's personal data or government data or commercial data. The data spectrum here that was developed by the Open Data Institute starts to help us ask the question, is the data open? Can it be used by anyone for any purpose? Or is it closed and purely company confidential? Or can it be used by other parties in this middle range, shared data? And if so, how can we really do that at scale? So when we think about how to get to net zero, we need to start sharing data across sectors between organizations at scale. We haven't really had to do that before. The core principle here is how do we connect data rather than collect it? Icebreaker 1's work is to help people connect data. They can certainly create their own collections and specific instances of databases as they need to, but at market scale, how do we create an open market? At the moment in net zero, this is largely anchored around carbon reporting, but we know in the near future, this is going to expand significantly. So at Icebreaker 1, when we talk about net zero, we mean net zero impact on our biosphere. And if we get to the point of net zero impact on our biosphere, this will bring prosperity to everyone. Underpinning this, our connected ecosystems are the basis and foundations of both our economy and our society. I'm going to unpack this a little bit more. We've got our energy sector, water sectors, our built world, transport, agriculture, all having to connect into the financial economy, into this net zero data ecosystem, in a way that helps us reduce consumption, that helps assess and address embodied carbon in products and services, that looks at financial stresses, resource efficiencies, that really helps people plan and look at risk management and transition planning. There are thousands of applications here that we need to address in our systems thinking, but we need ways of connecting all this information in a really material and effective way. I'm going to bring this into a little bit more detail here. So when we talk about mapping between policy, finance, and our real economies, at the very high level, we've got science as determined by the IPCC and other international bodies, translated into regulations that create mandates that drive disclosure and impact. These are translated into standards and frameworks for disclosure and reporting, and in turn, those use protocols and methods and models to help us assess the impact of our activities and actions. These have to then be processed through our accounting systems and reporting tools to produce reports that are then used by the financial markets to create ratings and help markets invest, providing funding back into the real economy. And that real economy has to provide the impact data of what it's doing in order to inform what happens. And all of this needs to be auditable. So it's quite a complex system. And we believe here that there are really scalable ways of addressing data sharing around these different systems. And when we look at this together, it really does combine policy, the real economy, and the financial economy around trusted data. Icebreaker's role here is to help us bring trust to these data flows. Now, let's look at an example that could unlock tens of billions for SMEs through the creation of personalised net zero investment plans. This programme, which we've called Perseus, will help unlock access to finance to reduce emissions by automating sustainability reporting for every SME in the UK. And in the first instance, we're starting with assurable SME electricity data from smart meters, so that SMEs can see their emissions from this energy use and share it via their reporting solutions with their banks to unlock green finance. In 2023, we brought together dozens of people to create the blueprint for how to do this, detailing why and what is needed, both commercially, legally, technically, and at scale. The report's on our website and it's Creative Commons licensed, so it's open to copy. I want to step through this starting point of the programme. So to get access to this raw information, we need to know what's being generated on a half-hourly basis, what's the carbon intensity of the grid at the time and location of use. The SMEs who have smart meters need to give permission through to their data providers and the software applications to access 30-minute resolution consumption data, and that needs to be passed to the auditors and accountants, then the reports given to the bank in an insurable manner. The banks can then work with those software applications, provide personalised recommendations back to the SME, as well as planning and financial incentives based on that analysis. The rulebook that results from all of this work on how to share data, why and what the impact is called a scheme. And we want the whole process here of the data collection, the calculation and reporting to be cohesive and aligned. So we end up with comparable information that can be used by the banks to de-risk their investments and provide assurable data through the chain. Once the intervention's been funded, the data flow supports measurement, reporting and verification all the way back through the chain in an assurable manner. So how do we do this? Well, we start with governance. At the top of the decision-making tree here, we have a steering group, which is represented by non-commercial actors and trade associations. They are informed by advisory groups, populated by commercial actors who sign off exactly what they need. And they are supported in turn by working groups who get the right details of what's required technically, legally, from a policy perspective, and based on the user needs of everybody in this value chain. This is all overseen by an oversight committee, which in this programme includes the Institute of Directors, the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and UK Finance. Collectively, this will define a scheme, which we're calling the Perseus scheme, the rulebook of how the data can be shared. We'll come back to that later. This enables the market actors who want to implement the scheme to sign up to the common rulebook. And in this case, it's all been convened through Bankers for Net Zero, who are the UK chapter of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and that sits under GFANZ and the UNFI. We also inform observers on the international stage and publishing everything we do publicly and openly. So at the top, we've got Bankers for Net Zero. We've then got the steering group, which we co-chair alongside the British Business Bank, and then over a dozen different trade associations representing the views of their different members. This includes UK Energy, the Federation of Small Businesses, UK Finance on behalf of the banks. Government is also involved to ensure that this meets the public need and the public good as well as the market needs. And then we have a range of international observers, including the OECD and the International Chambers of Commerce. This work is all supported by our commercial members who co-fund the development of the programme. This includes large organisations, the banks, carbon reporting tools, carbon accounting solutions, large and small companies. And when we come to the implementation of the scheme, we've got this coalition of non-profits and for-profits defining the rules. We call this process icebreaking. So let's look at how this fits together. The rulebook gets co-defined and codified into this scheme and placed into what's called a trust framework. The trust framework publishes open standards, has a sandbox environment, and has directories of the organisations who've signed up to the scheme, the details of the scheme itself, and which data is allowed to be shared for which purposes. So the trust framework is a very thin layer of verification and assurance. This means that carbon accounting applications can verify that they're allowed to access data from a source, in this case a smart meter, with the permission of the customer. But once these different organisations have been validated as part of the scheme, which includes the legal basis for data sharing, the data can flow with the permission of the end customer from point to point. At no point here do we have any intermediary database. The trust framework helps to manage trust between all the actors in the system. That information can then be shared with the auditors and accountants, with the banks and lenders, and potentially back to the regulators who want to monitor progress. So we've got two parts of this. We've got the icebreaking process to define the rules, and then the implementation of a scheme, which is the codification of the rules within the trust framework. This helps to verify and assure what everybody's doing. So let's take a step back. What are our data sharing challenges in this net zero world? Well, we need to enable millions of organizations to share confidential data. Smart meter data, for example, should never be open, as it contains materially sensitive information related to businesses. We need to ensure that the data can be trusted by the financial system, but we need controls to make it easy for the markets to manage risk. To enable sharing, those rules need to be enforceable, scalable, and assurable. And as we've illustrated here, there will be many diverse rules and systems across these value chains. Electricity is just a starting point, even for carbon reporting. We need to expand that to transport and water, other energy types, agriculture, and so on. So this really is just a starting point. Data sharing governance and trust frameworks can help by creating open market architectures. It centralizes the governance but enables decentralized data sharing. It's collaborative and it separates governance from the data itself. There's a very thin layer of technology to help enable this, but the individual systems that any organizations want to use is entirely up to them. They just have to have what's called an API. This enables it to be enforceable by humans and by machines and address permissions and data sovereignty along the way. And of course, at the heart of this, the whole process itself has to be assurable, so we can address intellectual property, liability, and security. So, how do we go far together? Trusted data sharing should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. We quite often hear organizations wanting to centralize or create common pooling of data in a large database. Trust frameworks don't stop that from happening. And in fact, they can make it easier for people to create those pools. But the starting point really needs to be anchored in good governance. If you think about how data operates inside your organization today, you've got various teams and departments. They probably have spreadsheets and databases scattered around a whole bunch of reporting tools, a variety of cloud solutions and data lakes. So when you think about how you share data outside of your organization, that usually happens through some form of bilateral contract and technical integration. It doesn't really scale. If you're looking to share your data with hundreds or thousands or even potentially millions of different organizations, this increases in complexity very quickly. So when you think about the complexity, when you take this to market-wide scale, how do we get organizations sharing data with each other in a broad, decentralized ecosystem? The challenges include complexity, operational costs, integration costs, legal costs, liabilities, and all of these are increasing at an exponential rate. This introduces unknown risks, particularly if you're going across jurisdictions. There's a lack of scalable controls and very poor modes of redress if something goes wrong. So this makes the whole system very inefficient and it doesn't really scale. The market challenges are you've got lack of cohesion. So what we want here, common rules to enable interoperability. We need common processes to enable legal interoperability and common legal frameworks. We need risks and controls to be addressed, and this needs to be universal across the market. These are quite substantial challenges. So when we think about trusted data sharing, we start with a use case such as Perseus. The market can say that we'd like to create a collaborative way of defining the rules anchored around user needs. The scheme is then implemented in a trust framework, and organizations who want to opt into that, both at a human level, so lawyers can check their contracts, and a machine level, so they can trust each other automatically once they're verified. There are 5 pillars of activity around this work, looking at user needs, technical needs, data licensing and legal needs, policy needs, and engagement and communications is critical throughout all of this, both within the stakeholders and externally to the market. So to recap here, we've got a process, which we call icebreaking, that pulls together all of the different steering, advisory, and working groups to codify these rules. When we implement the trust framework, this enables data sharing on an ongoing basis. And effectively, we're operating trust frameworks as a service. So how does this scale? At Icebreaker 1, we've been developing mechanisms to deliver trust frameworks as a service for some years. Really, they need to do as little as possible. At a fundamental level, They do identity management. There's a core registry. They enable assurance and embody the principles of data sharing and open data publishing. So for example, here we have the energy sector trust framework, which we call Open Energy. That has its own governance. That trust framework can then have its own schemes or the rulebooks for different use cases. So for example, a scheme could cover smart meter data just within the energy sector, and we could have other schemes related to flexibility and other types of asset level information sharing. We've created a core trust framework. Perseus is a good example of that, which is a cross-sector scheme. It needs to bring together data from across different industries, but we can start sharing some of the identity management and registry information. And we can have a core basis of what assurance means. These principles for data sharing can be embodied across sector. From a governance point of view, we've learned that each of the sectors does need its own governance that looks after the needs of that sector. So we need a mechanism here, for example, with water. They might have their own scheme for data sharing of smart meters, which might be similar to the energy sector, but the governance is going to be materially different because they're operating in a different regulated environment. So, how can you get involved? I'd like to invite you to become an Icebreaker. Icebreaker 1 is a non-profit, membership-based organisation. We have a sliding scale of fees based on organisational size. As a large organisation, you can join as a corporate member or even as a strategic partner. Startups can also join, and you can even join as an individual. Commercial membership also includes membership of our core trust framework, so you can get ready and prepared to join schemes as they emerged. Thank you for your time today. My name is Gavin Starks. Please do follow us on LinkedIn, and if you want to find out any more information, please do have a look at our website. Thank you for your time.